Well, I think there's the physical side of it, which I do the equivalent of an ultra marathon every weekend. I do 52 hours. On the last day, I did 26 and a half miles. The previous day, 22 miles. So just the physical side, you have to be in incredible shape. And I'm in better shape physically today, both my endurance, my muscular strength, and so forth, than when I was 25, which is wonderful. And so I do certain things for that. But I think I should mention first, what's even more important is the psychological, spiritual side of things, because I think energy comes first, not from your body. It doesn't come from eating. It doesn't come from sleeping, because I've gone without those things for long periods of time and still been able to deliver. It comes from having a mission. It comes from something that you're being pulled by, not something you're pushing on. Those are two forms of motivation. You can push yourself to do things, and there's only so much you can push yourself to do. But if you're pulled, if there's something that you want to serve that's greater than yourself, there's something that excites you, if there's something that you're about, something you're made for, then there's a level of energy that most people would never dream of. And we all have that, but most of us don't connect to it and unleash it. So every day I connect and unleash that every single day. I don't hope it's going to be there, even though I know it will be, even though it's there. I don't take it for granted. And so I start out with my day by a process I do called priming. And what priming is, it's not a meditation, but it has meditative qualities. And what I do is I sit down. First thing I do in the morning, I go and I jump in a hot tub or a hot water type of experience, and then I go to a freezing water. All my homes, I'm fortunate enough to have multiple homes, that I go, one of them I have a river I get to jump in. You've been there.
Yeah.
There are other places I have these cold plunges. And I do that to train my nervous system to go from 0 to 60 like that. Every muscle, every nerve in your body, every organ gets, when you hit 57-degree water, it hits. And so it's just my mental discipline. Then the second thing I do is I prime. And priming is I sit down and I do a minimum of 10 minutes, because my mindset is, if you don't have 10 minutes, you don't have a life.
Right.
So there's no excuse. So every day, sit down, and what do? I do 3.5 minutes where I do an explosive breathing pattern, a pattern that changes my biochemistry. And after I've done that, 30 of these intense breaths 3 times, I close my eyes and I'm kind of in an altered state, and I focus first for 3.5 minutes on just everything in my life, at least 3 things that I'm really, truly grateful for. And I don't do that in a hokey way. I don't do it in a mental way. I step into my body and feel it, and I make sure at least one of those things is something really simple. The wind against my skin, the look on my son's eyes or daughter's eyes, something that is just very fundamental, but I cultivate that feeling of gratitude, of appreciation for those feelings. And I do it for 3.5 minutes. Then I do 3.5 minutes where I do this process of focusing on healing, strengthening, and serving. And I start in a circle, starting with myself, and then I go through all the people in my life and associates, and I just send love to them. Again, it may sound corny, but to me, it's a part of what I'm here for, and it's a part of cultivating that energy, that healing and strength energy, and strengthening my passion, my appreciation, my insights, my capacity, my endurance. And then I do the last 3 minutes are what I call 3 to Thrive, which is, what is it that I really want to make happen? And sometimes I do that over what I'm going to do for the next 6 months or month, and sometimes it's today. I shake it up. But I see and feel and own that those things are done. And that starts, pretty much my day between those 2 items. And, then I have my workouts and things that I do of that nature. Most decisions are made unconsciously. And like 48% of what we do, depending on which doctor you read, is about habit. What's great about habit is you don't have to think. What's bad about habit is you don't change, right? And so most people make these decisions unconsciously. But what are they? One, you decide every moment of your life, you're making a decision consciously or unconsciously what to focus on. So if you focus on the worst scenario, of course, you're going to feel sick to your stomach, right? And then you find out it's not true and you're fine, right? Focus equals feeling. But there's patterns of focus. So if I asked your audience right now, or all you guys, what do you think most people focus on more? What they have or what's missing?
The latter.
What's missing. And including super achievers. Like some of the biggest achievers are always focusing on what's missing because they're always trying to get to the next level. So what happens? As a result, when you're always focused on what's missing, you cannot sustain happiness. It has nothing to do with how intelligent you are. It's just like software. So you always look at what's missing, so you never feel fulfilled or alive, right? And so you keep being on the hamster wheel trying to do more, and it's never enough. That's what people end up being pushing and pushing and pushing, and you see them burn out. You have everything, and they're miserable. Second pattern. And by the way, we all do both. It's just where do you live more? And most people focus on what's missing. Do you think most people focus on what they can or can't control?
Probably the latter.
Can't is most people. Now, in my events, when I ask this to 15,000 people, most people focus on what they can control. That's why they're there, right? They came to take control of their body, their mind, or their business, or whatever, right? But for the average population, and during COVID, there's so much you can't control. It's easy to be focused on what you can't control, right? So there's lots of differences, but I'd say the first one is someone who is financially rich is an owner. they're not a consumer. They're a consumer also. But when somebody is poor, they're a consumer. That all they do is they take I always tell people we're all financial traders. A lot of people say, I'm not a financial trader. Yes, you are. You're trading time for money. Yeah. That's the worst trade you can ever make in your life. Somebody who's wealthy has made money their slave. They're no longer the slave to money. And the way they do that is they figured out how to become an owner. And the way you do that in the most simplistic way, I even taught it in my first book, was you have to decide there's a percentage of money that you're going to keep forever. You're not going to give it to Kate Spade or Ferrari or anybody else. You can do that too. But there's a percentage of that income that never will be touched, that you will grow and compound and will provide income for the rest of your life so you don't have to work. Now, when I was growing up, everybody's goal was get rich enough so you never have to work. Now, like all my friends are 15, 18 years my senior. People like Steve Wynn and built most of Las Vegas. He's like 74. Warren Buffett's 85. Peter Guber, one of my dearest friends in the world, owns the Golden State Warriors, the LA Dodgers. We're partners in the LAFC football team in LA. Brilliant guy, 74 years old. And they're all working harder now than they ever were, and they don't have to work. So the goal is make enough money so you don't have to work, and then you'll do what you love, and you'll pour your time and energy into it. But you have to make that decision. It's the first most important decision is I'm going to become an owner of American business. You don't want to have an Apple phone and not own Apple. And you don't want to just own Apple because any company can go up and down, right? You want to own the index. You want to own, a variety with enough diversification. But if you can just shift, and I've taught people who've told me they have no money, they can't save. It's really easy once you get momentum. There's a research project I did with a gentleman who was nominated for Nobel Prize on behavioral finance. And what he did was he said, if you can even, you need to save 15% ideally. But if you could even save 3%, because anybody can do that. They took a group of blue collar workers in the Midwest and said, we're going to force you to save 3%. I think it was 3.25 or 3.5. But then everybody can go on a diet tomorrow. Everybody can save money tomorrow, right? Yeah. So his tool was, all right, you're not going to save today, you're going to save tomorrow. We'll do the 3.5%, but then you go to your employer and say, the next time I get a raise, the first 5% goes to my savings account, to my investing account. And then every time you get a raise, you do that. Well, in 14 years, the average person was saving 15%, and the top 40% were saving 20%. Now, let me explain what that means. You and I were together before. When I'm trying to explain compounding to people, everybody understands it intellectually. But when I ask some of the richest people in the world, what are most investors failing to do? And they all say they're not tapping the power of compounding. So if you're in a situation where, as an example, let's take you've got $100,000 that you've saved, you're 35 years old, and you put it in the market and just leave it there and never add anything to it. If you leave it in the market and you're only being charged 1% in fees, at retirement 35 years later, you got $762,000 from that 100. Never added a dime. It grew that much. Wow. But if you pay 3% in fees, which is the average most people are paying, when you ask people what they're paying, they don't know, or they say 1%. Because when you hear about it, fees, let's say a mutual fund fee, you'll always hear 1%. That's the expense ratio. There are 17 other fees. So every 1% you overpay, 1% is the average. But if you pay 2 or 3, and the average mutual fund is 3.12, sounds like nothing, 1 or 2%. But every 1% you overpay because of compounding means you lose a decade of income. So the person who paid 1% has $762,000. The person who paid 3% has $452,000, and they own the same stocks. It's just fees. So while we compound our interest, we also compound fees. So if you could save 3% and build it to 5, 10, 15, or you start with 10 or 15 and eventually get to 20, the best example I can give your viewers is that there's a gentleman who worked for UPS who literally never made more than $14,000 a year. You heard about him in the book. And when he retired, he had $70 million. Crazy. And he gave away $35 million while he was alive. And the reason was a friend of his set him aside and said, look, I'm going to make you rich. He goes, I'm never going to be rich. I make 14 grand a year. He goes, I'm going to make you rich. I'm going to make you rich later in life. And I'm going to do it by a 20% tax to your business. And he goes, I make $14,000 a year. I can't live on 20% less. And his friend said to him, if the IRS came and said a 20% more tax, you'd scream, you'd yell, and you'd pay it. And he said, but we're going to pay it for you. And that 20% compounded generated $70 million. So for the people that are at home, the sooner you start, the better off you are, because compounding does it. I've got an example in the book of a guy that starts at 19. He puts aside $300 a month. He stops at 27. So he does it for 8 years. He only puts in, I think it was $35,000. But It's $1 million by leaving in the market when he turned 65 and he stopped at 28. He has a best friend that starts at 28, invests his entire life, puts in $180,000, and he has less money at the end. The sooner you start, the better you are.
Yeah.
Well, I think the best performers are focused on outcomes and not activities. If you try to manage your to-do list in the world we live in today, where most of us have multiple roles, we're trying to be a great business person, a great husband or wife, great father, great community member, or whatever, there's just so many roles, you can never get all your to-dos done. And what helped me in my life was I started at one point saying, I'm not going to let myself fail every day. I'm not going to get a to-do list, and I'm not going to not write a list so that I don't fail. I need to focus on what matters most. I needed to organize my life into categories where I say, these are the most important outcomes, and then I know why I'm going to do it. If you know what you really want, the target, and you know why, you have the focus and you have the fuel, then how to get there, there's so many ways to get there. And then the most important thing I think that the most productive people do is we leverage what we do. We don't delegate. Delegation is I give it to you, and then when it doesn't work out, I'm pissed at you. Leverage is I empower you. If I'm leveraged, I'm still part of that, and I'm going to make sure you succeed. I'm going to follow up. I'm going to make sure before the deadline I touch base with you. I'm going to make sure you have the resources to succeed. But what I do is empower people. Go, here's the outcome, here's the why. I get you and I aligned with the outcome and the why. You figure out how you want to do it. I'm open. You want brainstorm with me? I'll do it. You'll probably come up with better ideas than I do. And when you empower people to come up with their own how, and they know what and why, you can get the job done 100 times faster, especially if you get a group of people. I'm a big believer that early in my life, I thought I was such a smart person. I'm going to solve all this stuff. Part of it was being responsible, and part of it is ego that we all have inside ourselves if we've succeeded to a certain extent. I said, this is bullshit. You know what? Instead of one person solving 12 problems, I want 12 people to solve one problem. And I developed that practice, and I began to find that people that many people thought weren't going to contribute had insights nobody else had. I really got it from Steve Wynn. Steve Wynn's a dear friend of mine, and he's rebuilt Las Vegas, one of those brilliant men I know, multi-billionaire. And Steve really learns the most from the bellmen, from the people that would never make it into the C-suite. He learns what customers are feeling, what they're experiencing, how to have an impact, what needs to be changed, because these people are on the front lines. So I'm a big believer that you need leverage. And if you're just starting out in business, I know a lot of people that will probably watching your shows are watching you because you're a successful businesswoman who's built your own entrepreneurship. You've done so many great things. I think in the very beginning, the hard thing is you think you can only do it yourself, and then there's only so many hours, and you've got kids and family and friends, and how do I do it all? The answer is you hire someone. You trade with someone. You trade them for 2 hours. That's what I did in the beginning. Because I'll never forget, I was just really young in my career, very in the early days, and I was running to get to the dry cleaners so I could get my only 2 suits. Because if I didn't get them, then the place closes, then I can't get on the plane, and running to the airport, sweating like crazy. I'm a sweater anyway. Right? It's like sweating like this, trying to get in the door, and it's like, what is wrong with this picture? I could be doing something that's so productive, and I'm standing in line at the dry cleaning place, and this is just nuts. And so I was really young, I was like 17, 18, 19, I don't know what it was. And I said, I'm gonna hire somebody. 2 hours a day, that's what I had to start with. And then it was 4 hours. And so my view is I don't do anything that someone else can do better, and I don't do anything that isn't the highest and best use of my time. Now, when I say that, that's gross generalization. There are things I still will do. But for the most part, by finding people and getting clear on outcomes and the why, what I call RPM, you gotta know the result, you gotta know the purpose, and then you gotta have a massive action plan. And the plan can change. But that RPM, the stronger the RPMs, the faster that car is gonna move. And I try to do that, not just through myself, but through other people. The pattern I see in slumps, whether it be an athlete or a financial trader or an actor or any of that nature, is number one thing that causes a slump usually is you get too comfortable. When you start doing something and you're really successful, a lot of people lose their hunger. And if you ask me, what is the single most important element of any human being that separates their level of success from the rest of the world? It's hunger. It isn't intelligence, as valuable as that is. There are people that are incredibly intelligent, can't fight their way up a paper bag. You show me somebody who's not only hungry, but doesn't lose their hunger, they will dominate everything. And you see that in the greatest sports stars, the greatest entertainers, the ones that they're insatiable. And because of that, you like being around them because there's this energy about them, this passion about them, and very few people maintain that. And you lose your hunger, you go into a slump. You get overconfident. Another pattern that happens that gives people a slump is when something changes in their world that they're not prepared for. Like, I've been doing this forever, and oh my God, now my relationship's messed up. Or, I've been working hard on being a lawyer, and now my wife's upset, her husband's upset with me. What do I got to do here? And what it does is it throws people off their rhythm. And so I try to figure out what's happening in their environment and show them how they can win in both categories simultaneously. A third one is when people do something where they get mad at themselves, kind of like a Tiger Woods, and then he's got all the skill in the world, nothing changed in his skill, but for that year and a half or whatever it was, I mean, he was beating himself up, you know? And in that state, it's kind of a self-sabotage. And so depending on what form I find, I enter in and make the changes. And there are almost always changes, again, in the psychology of that person, the emotion of that person, because we have these great minds. Everybody's got a great mind, or at least available great mind. But we're emotional creatures. And we forget that because we live in a society that tries to value thought much more than emotion, because emotion is scary for us. Emotion can come really fast. And so some people try to avoid it at all costs. Other people are overwhelmed by it. My view is that emotional intelligence is a wonderful thing, but I much prefer emotional fitness. Intelligence is a capability. Fitness is a state of readiness. And what I do is I train myself to always be ready, and that makes you execute. And I think too many people settle for, I know this, as opposed to I'm doing this. And I try to train myself and others to be in that state of readiness all the time, because that's where life is really fulfilled at the highest level, I think. You know, with placebos, because most people, they underestimate what they can do with their mind. Like I'm sure you know, placebos, they were started in World War II. They weren't started, they were discovered in World War II, because this surgeon had all these guys dying and he ran out of morphine. And if you don't have morphine, people go into shock and die, and also they're in massive pain. And it wasn't even the surgeon, it was the nurse. She handed him a saline solution. He thought it was that and said, here, we found some more. She just didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
He believed it. So he turned to these people and said, you're gonna be out of pain in just a matter of seconds or minutes. We're gonna make it, none of them went to shock. Most of them were out of pain, and all he got was a saline solution. So after the war, he went back to Harvard and started studying this, and he started the studies that are now standardized, where you compare a drug, you know, to a placebo.
Yeah.
But what's crazy is, nobody reports about this, because there's lots of drugs that placebos are more effective, but you don't make billions selling a placebo, right?
Yeah.
And
Has anybody tried that?
Well, they actually have. They did one study where it said placebo, and people responded. But what they found is the bigger the intervention, the more your brain believes and changes your biochemistry. So a small pill versus a larger pill, big difference. An injection, even bigger reaction. False surgery, the VA did a placebo surgery where they took a third of the people for arthroscopic surgery, and they just cut up their skin and sewed it, never did anything to the knee. It's in the book. A year later, guess what? The people who had the least amount of pain, who were most recovered and said their life was the best, were the people that didn't have the surgery. So the VA doesn't cover it anymore. They don't fund it anymore because it doesn't work. And as I mentioned, you know, when I was a kid, we had a Thanksgiving, no money and no food, and somebody came to the door, knocked on the door, and delivered this food, and it was life-changing for me, because it wasn't the food, it was that my father had always said, nobody cares about anybody else, you know. He built that belief system into us, and I saw that strangers really care. And so I swore someday I'd do something to give back. So I was 17, I fed 2 families, and the next year, 4 families, the next 8. I didn't tell anybody, but after the 4th year, I was like, I could use some help. So I got my friends involved, and then my companies, and then it built to 1 million people, and then 2 million people. In the last 4 or 5 years, I've been matching the 2 million my foundation does personally with another 2 million, so we feed 4 million people a year. But while I was writing this, Congress last year passed a new budget that nobody seemed to pay attention to, where they cut food stamps, they don't call it food stamps anymore, but it's food stamps, by $8.7 billion. It basically limited 2 million people from having food. And so I work with all these nonprofit organizations that are already struggling, and it just made me crazy. And I thought, okay, what if I'm working my ass up in this book, but you know what? I could donate all the profits of this book, not a percentage. And then I thought, what if I donate all in advance? Whether I make money in the book, it doesn't matter. I'm going to do it in advance. How many people could I feed? And it was 10 million. And I was like, wow, that excited me. And it just grew a life of its own. As time went by, I started thinking, how could I really get people's attention about it? And so I finally decided that I'm going to feed 50 million. I'm writing the check actually next week. Personally, I'm going to feed 50 million people up front. And in addition to that, I'm working with Feeding America. They're the best hunger relief organization in the United States. And they're going to partner with me to get matching funds so we can feed 100 million people. And it's just exciting. I've fed 42 million people in my life. I'm going to feed more people this year. And so for anybody who gets a book, you know, if I sell 1 million books, 50 meals for every person that's there. If I sell 100 books, it'll be 500,000 meals for that's there. But it doesn't matter. I've done it up front. And I'm not doing it because I'm a good guy. I'm just paying it forward. People forget what a little bit of caring can do for, you know, to inspire or to move somebody. And I don't even know to this day who fed my family that day, but if they're out there, if they're still alive, I hope they see and hear the story and know what's going on. My guess is they pass because I've shared the story many times and no one's volunteered to share what it is. But that person made a giant difference. It wasn't just feeding, it was caring. And that's what I think changes people's lives. What do you think happens to somebody who's constantly focusing on what's missing and constantly focusing on what they can't control? They're going to be pissed or angry, overwhelmed or stressed or depressed. Then add the third one. And I gave you a dozen, we'll just do 3. What do you think most people spend their time more? The past, the present, or the future?
Future.
Future?
Probably a mix of the two, past or future. Definitely not the present.
Depends on the person.
Right.
Most achievers focus on the future. You are correct. Most people who are unhappy and frustrated, which unfortunately is the majority of humans, most people are not happy and thrilled and have a great body and a great relationship. We all can, but very few people do because they're focused on the past, and usually they can't change it. Or they focus on a future that they're concerned about. And either way, they're stressed. So I ask people, I got 20,000 people in a stadium, and say, how many of you know somebody who takes antidepressants and they're still depressed? And 85% of the hands go up. Do you guys know anybody like that?
Yeah,
Absolutely. I don't take any antidepressants anymore, but when I did, I was still completely, they do nothing.
So the question is, why is that? Well, on the side it says create suicidal thoughts. That's a clue, right? But it numbs you, right? That's what it does. It doesn't change the source of the problem, which is you're constantly focusing on what you can't control, what's missing, perhaps the past. Just as 3 examples.
Band-Aid over a bullet wound.
Exactly right. Oh, that's a good metaphor. I like that. I'll steal that.
May I? Just like put George
Full credit. I like that.
The turtleneck.
Look at the way he's sitting right now.
Because I didn't want to disrespect him like
No, it's good. I mean, just with the turtleneck and the, like, you look
guys,
so
we're in front of,
sophisticated.
we're not in front of rappers anymore, guys. You gotta...
But the point is, when you change those decisions, like the first decision is focus, then the second decision is, what does it mean? The minute you focus on something, you gotta, what does it mean? So you wake up and feel like shit, what does it mean? Well, I effed up last night, or it's the end of the world,
Like a
or
checkup.
it doesn't matter,
A
right?
checkup.
The meaning creates your life. But when you said emotional home, what I learned is that people have an emotional home. Like some people, I'm sure you know, no matter what happens, they're pissed off. Or no matter what happens, they're worried. They worry about other people and themselves. Or you know somebody that's not funny, but they think they are. And no matter what happens, they have a good time, right? So people have an emotional home.
It's an inside
You
joke
looking
that
at
needs
you
to
on
die
that
right
one?
now. It's like funny here, but that's my career, guys. Yeah, you're already a billionaire. Okay. I'm gonna go crawl up this little slide.
They're different for everybody, obviously, but what I try to do, if I was trying to look at it from a universal perspective, I guess what I really want to know before I get there as much as I can is everything I can about the person, and I do that because I really want to know, what do they want? What do they want of their life? What's their mission? What are they after? And what do they fear? What are their concerns? Because I believe life is found in the dance between what you desire most and what you fear most. And if I know those 2 edges of a person, I know a lot. And then I dig under and try to learn as much as I can from other people about whatever the challenge may be. And then I go prepared to just learn from the person directly. But I want to know as much as I can before I go in there. Then I take all that I think I know, and then I see what's really real when I meet them. And I'm digging in to discover what's the challenge, what do they perceive it is. And usually, if I were to grossly generalize, if you're going to help somebody create a breakthrough, it all comes down to 3 areas. Either they've altered their strategy. We all have strategies, a specific way of succeeding, and sometimes we alter it, whether it be in sports or whether it be in finance or any other area. We forget something, we lose a little edge, we drop something out, and then it becomes a bad habit. Or sometimes it's a change in our beliefs. Like, you may have done something for decades and been really successful, but now, I know one gentleman who's a good friend of mine that, had 52 Academy Award nominations, and he said to me one day, he said, if I make one more frickin' movie, I'll kill myself. He's just like, I don't want to make a movie, I don't want an Academy Award, I don't want any of these things, And it's just like he's satiated. And so sometimes when people get satiated, they lose their hunger, they shift their beliefs. And when you change a belief, you change your biochemistry. When you change your belief, you change the way you execute, you change everything. And we all develop stories. And sometimes stories are empowering and sometimes the mental stories are disempowering. So I'm listening for those, I'm digging for those. And then I also look at their state. Because you could do the same exact action from a place of being pissed off or from a place of playfulness, and the same action's not gonna get you the same result. And so I'm looking for that quality of what's going on in them. And then I look and try to find out what it was like before. So with Paul Tudor Jones, I went back and I watched videos of him when he was at his best. And I saw how he used his body and the way he moved. And I saw him now sitting still and kind of slumped over, and he broken his leg and he talked at a different tempo. So I look at biochemically what's happening, physiologically. I look at psychologically what's going on, and then I look at structurally what they're doing. And then I develop a plan to help them get back to where they were and beyond, to better performance than they had before. The first thing they should do is change their physiology. Because before you try to take care of your mind, you take care of your body. Your body affects your emotion. I teach people how to radically change their body in seconds. I deal with athletes or CEOs or whoever it is, and you can change it instantly. Not fake pump up bullshit, but a real biochemical change. So, I get up every morning, my first thing is, boom, I go straight into the ice water, right? And I don't do it because I like it. I never look forward to doing it. In my home in Sun Valley, I walk through the snow and I go in the river. It's like, 40 degrees.
Every morning you do this.
Every morning, I don't miss. And there's never been a morning I look forward to it. Never. But I'll tell you why I do it.
You ever met Wim Hof?
I know Wim Hof really well. But I do it because besides the physical capacity, which, your lymph flow, your blood flow changes radically.
Brain.
It's the discipline
I
of
just
saying,
did
I'm
this week.
gonna do this. I'm like, I don't go and say, oh, when I'm ready, or it's like, when I say go, MFR, we go now.
Yeah.
And then when you do that every day, then when tough shit happens, you just say, this is what we're doing, and your brain responds. So before they even work on their head, they got to do something to make their body strong, because we all respond to challenge. You know that better than anybody. So if we keep every day giving a different kind of stimulus or challenge, we get stronger. Then how they become conscious of it is they simply ask themselves, in this moment, what am I focusing on? They start to ask, what am I focusing on? Well, what's wrong is always available. So is what's right. Right? And so you just develop a new habit. You go, okay, look at that shit. Okay, erase, let me do this one, right? And then the meanings are the most important ones, because when you're really upset, there's a meaning. And I always tell people, meanings come from beliefs. And when people go to a seminar, I do this process called the Dickens to figure 2 or 3 beliefs that are messing them up in some area, and we decimate them, not intellectually understand them, you get out of your body and replace it. Because a belief's a poor substitute for an experience. Like you guys could believe, I could believe something about you, you could believe about me, but if we go hang out for a week, we know each other. If you tell me I know what China's like, you've never been there, it's your belief. If we go live there for 6 months, now you know. Mm-hmm. And so I try to give people experiences as opposed to beliefs that kind of change what they're doing. But to answer your question is they got to change the body first. They could do it by lifting weights. Anything that requires you to do something, even for a short time, it could be in 10 minutes, where you're pushing way beyond your comfort zone. What that does, it makes your mind and your body work together. And then you develop real will.